For context, I'm male and had just turned 19 at the time of this story. I worked at a gas station in Arizona. I had just finished my shift at around 11 p.m. and locked up the store. As I stepped outside, I felt a chill run down my spine, a feeling of being watched. I glanced around nervously, but the parking lot was empty except for a lone figure standing near one of the pumps. My heart skipped a beat as I approached the figure. It was a young woman with pale skin and dark eyes. She seemed to be staring off into the distance. Her expression was vacant and unsettling. I hesitated, unsure if I should approach her, but something compelled me to offer assistance. As I got closer, I noticed that she was muttering to herself, her words garbled and incomprehensible. "Are you okay?" I asked tentatively, my voice trembling with fear. The woman turned to me, her gaze piercing and intense. "My car broke down," she said, her voice low and raspy. "I need help." I felt a surge of unease wash over me, but I pushed it aside, determined to be of assistance. I fetched a gas canister from the storage room and filled it with fuel, all the while feeling the weight of the woman's gaze on me. She spoke up and said, "My car is just down the road. Will you give me a ride?" I asked if there was someone I could call for her, but she said, "No, please just give me a ride." She paused, gave me a look up and down, and said, "I'll make it worth it." Now, telling by the way she smiled and looked at me, she wasn't talking about paying with money. Plus, earlier, when I grabbed the gas canister, she told me that she didn't have any money. So, me being a stupid 19-year-old, I agreed. We hopped in my car and started down the road. We made small talk, and she told me how she had been having trouble with her car battery. I was confused by this. I thought she needed gas. I told her gas isn't going to help with a dead battery. She paused and said, "Oh no, my battery is fine. I just need gas." Then silence. I had been ignoring my gut up until this point. Something wasn't right here. I asked how much further her car was, as we had been driving down this secluded road with trees on both sides for 10 minutes with no sign of her car. She told me it was just a little further. I continued driving for another couple of minutes when suddenly my headlights illuminated a car on the side of the road. As I drove past it, I quickly stopped and asked if that was her car. She said it was, and seemed annoyed that I had passed it. I quickly did a 3-point turn, but as I was turning around, I saw another car parked off in the trees. As my headlights lit it up, I swear I saw someone duck down in the driver's seat. I pretended I didn't notice it and stopped at her car. I told her I would wait here until she filled her car up and left to make sure she was okay, but she insisted that I come to her car so she could pay me. I declined and said I was just glad I could help, but she kept insisting that I go with her. I told her, "No, get the hell out of my car." She jumped out and started towards her car. I noticed she left the gas behind, so I rolled down my window. "You left your gas can in here, but you don't actually need it, do you?" She stopped and said, "You're smart." Then the car I had seen earlier suddenly pulled out and blocked the road behind me. Luckily, since I had turned around earlier, I was facing the other way. She got in her car and tried to cut in front of me to box me in, but I gunned it out of there before she could. My heart was beating out of my chest. I couldn't believe what just happened. I kept looking back the whole drive home to make sure I wasn't being followed, but luckily I made it home with no further incidents. I don't know if they wanted to steal my car or worse, my kidneys. But honestly, I'm just glad I didn't have to find out. Sarcophagus. As a 10-year-old, as most can admit, I had an overactive imagination. Although I can't prove what I saw those nights was real, this story shaped who I am today, and the eagerness to share this story has sunk as deep as a National Geographic treasure hunter ship in the ocean. And seeing all you share your stories of disdain, it makes me feel almost normal for experiencing that fateful night. It was my 10th birthday. I had only a few friends at the time, and to this day I can't believe anyone showed up with the theme being Ben 10. There were 4 of us, those being me, Alex, Sarah, and Tom. Somehow we had all convinced the oblivious adults to allow us to explore the small patch of trees, barely able to be called forest, but still big enough to get lost in. We walked out the door, leaving the terribly inflated green balloons and sideways hung tapestries behind. We waved goodbye and headed out behind the house. "What if we see a serial killer?" Sarah called out to the rest of us boys, who were so far ahead of her we could barely hear. "Oh, don't worry, dear princess. Your chivalrous knight will defend you," Tommy called back, making fake stab motions pretending to fight back monsters or whatever creatures were filling his young mind. "Tommy, you couldn't even fight off Daryl at school a week ago," me and Alex laughed as we stopped for the rest to catch up. "Hey," Tommy said sheepishly as his arms fell back in place. "He's like 7 feet tall." "Well, I still thought it was brave," Sarah said with a smile as she patted his shoulder, just reaching his place in the field. "Come on, guys," I dragged out as I started walking slowly into the tree line so the rest could catch up. "They're going to expect us back soon, and I want to see something cool." Little did my 10-year-old mind know that I was going to see something cool at a price. The woods, even though patchy, were still clogged with trees. Although some stories say that the sounds of the forest fill your ears the moment you step in, I can only remember now that it was eerily quiet that day. We were too busy being kids to feel the dense silence in the air. "Hey, stop that!" I swatted at Tommy as he slid behind me, pretending as if he wasn't just pulling at my shoulder-length hair for the past 5 minutes. "I'm bored," Alex said sluggishly behind us. "Well, is the party behind us really any better?" I asked. "No," he said quietly, his shoulders slouching a bit. "Exactly." I noticed the 2 boys drift off the path as Tommy spotted a squirrel, and the adventure began for him and Alex. I was left alone with Sarah. I didn't know her that well. She was Alex's cousin, and we had only spoken a few times during school. "So," she said, taking a few steps to my side, "you get anything cool for your birthday?" I was too busy looking at her very long auburn hair to hear her question, as I hit her with a small, "Your presents," she chuckled, placing her hands behind her back. "Oh, yeah, really cool stuff." I tried remembering for a moment, but suddenly found myself an amnesia patient in the doctor's office. Her tone seemed to die down as she just began to follow me to a small log we both sat on. I kicked at the dirt a little, and she joined me. It was a nice moment in my mind, as I can remember it, my last normal moment. "Mickey!" The loud scream ripping through the forest, my name. I looked quickly at the direction it came from, and back to Sarah, her face white, a look of terror that still rings clear in my head. I could imagine my face looked just as bad as I quickly got up from the log, dirt spraying in front of me. I started running in the direction it came from. I knew it was Alex, and I knew he was in trouble. I lost sight of Sarah, and everything became a blur. I got lightheaded, and then another scream. This wasn't Alex, and I was lost. "Alex!" I screamed through the blank green all around me. "Tommy!" The forest became a nightmare. I started moving in all different directions. After a while, the dark started peering over the trees, the stars becoming eyes staring at me. After about 10 minutes of darkness, I gave up and sat myself on the dirt. I wanted to cry. How could I have been so stupid? I got back up, determined to do something, to be able to get home. I couldn't push the fear away, though, and suddenly I became aware of the silence. Minutes went by and there were no birds. There were no squirrels. I couldn't even find a single ant on the rough dirt floor. It was as if something sucked all the life out of the planet. The only thing left, the creature making the screaming noise. I took another step and tripped, a small root catching my feet. That was the last straw. I broke down crying. After about 2 minutes of me feeling sorry for myself, I heard something. Rustling in the bush. My eyes darted around me to the patch of open path right in front of me. "Hello," I called out into the night, and immediately realized how stupid that was. "Hello." I forgot about the injury as I started scrambling to get up. It was silent again, but I didn't stop to dwell. I just ran. I changed direction almost every 5 minutes, hoping to loose whoever replied. About 10 minutes later, I saw something that made me stop running. It looked like a cave. It might have been about the first grayish-black thing I had seen yet, almost as dark as the night, but very reflective in the moonlight. It had jagged edges and looked as if an adult could only get through crawling on their knees, almost a perfect size for me. I took a few steps closer to it, a faint whistling sound coming from deep inside. To this day, I don't know why I went inside. I can't tell you what overcame me, what powerful force willed my small feet to move into that dark, dark area. But when I stepped a few feet inside, it wasn't dark. I could see everything, every outline of the cave wall, every rock and stone in the cave. It was as if I became nocturnal. I couldn't comprehend it. I kept going. I came into a split into the middle of the cave. Right, left. I went right. As my footsteps echoed through the small space, I started to creep slowly, afraid something would hear me. It was only a few minutes before the cave widened. I was able to go up on my toes and not touch the ceiling. The elonged cave spread out, and I could see something in the distance. It was in a rectangular shape, and even in the bare light of the cave, I could see every edge, every surface, every carved symbol. I stepped closer, a stench rising from the area. I couldn't tell what it was, but it was wretched. I had to plug my nose as I creeped closer to the big box. There was nothing in it. I was confused, and my mind started running. What was that smell? What was that smell? What was that smell? I looked ahead of me, as I was previously oblivious to anything but the box. I found the smell. Bodies. So many of them. Piled up to the roof of the cave, I couldn't count all of them. Where are my friends? In there? Tommy, Sarah, Alex? My feet wouldn't move, I just stared. My eyes wouldn't move, my feet stuck in cement. I saw women. I saw men. I saw children. "Hello!" I bolted, the silence broken, and a maniacal laughter rang through the cave. And as quickly as it came, it was gone, and I was quickly to the edge of the cave. I ran, and I ran, and I ran. Me feet tore against the soles of my shoes until they were numb. I was cut by so many thorns on branches it looked as if a knife was taken to every inch of my skin. I didn't stop running. I couldn't. And I was free. The tree line broke, and I was back outside, my backyard in view. I kept running and running till I got to the front. There were cop cars, and I could see all the parents talking to the police. Alex and Sarah huddled next to theirs. My mom saw me, and I collapsed into her arms. We started crying, and neither of us said a word. The silence didn't last long, though. "Tommy?" I heard a woman cry out next to me. "Where's my boy?" Tommy's mom was now screaming frantically as her husband tried to contain her, both their faces damp in the glow of the moon. "My boy." Tommy. Tommy never came home. The last time I go to the third floor, on third shift at 3 a.m. I am medical housekeeper in a local hospital. It's an old building opened in the 1950s. It's small, but serves its purpose. I was hired at part-time on first shift and would typically clean two sections, the ICU and the L&D departments. It's a gross, sometimes depressing job, but it helps out with the bills. The other week, a girl who works on third was asking everyone if they wouldn't mind picking up her shift for the weekend. She's a sweet girl, and I could not understand why no one was willing to help her out for just one weekend. Before she got to me after 4 no's in a row, I told her I would take her shift for her. She was beyond excited. I was too, in a way, because this wasn't my first rodeo on third shift, and it meant a little more extra cash on payday. I went on with my day, and the 4 people who originally turned her down kept warning me about Jane. I asked them who she was, and they all said, "You'll find out for yourself." I just assumed it was another coworker who was gone before I got to work, and figured she was just a high-strung older lady who was just tired of working but had no choice in it. Saturday finally came. I slept most of the day getting my brain ready to switch to nocturnal mode. It's been a while, but I was excited for it. Something about working with no management down my back for 8 hours is thrilling to think about. I left my house around 10 p.m. to get there early and relax some more while drinking my energy drink. When I got there 30 minutes later, I parked in my usual spot and looked around. Hospitals in general are pretty creepy, but no matter what, they're always creepy at night. I looked up and seen the first and second floors were dark, besides a few rooms where patients were still up with their TVs on and a small bed light. The thing that caught my eye was on the third floor. One window was lit up with the light from the room. I remembered my manager telling me in my interview about the hospital having a big budget cut, and they cut the psych ward out that was on the third floor and made it into offices and 2 computer labs. I never gone up there because I had no reason to. I figured it was just someone staying late to catch up on something. I went in and clocked in at 11. I was expecting to see 2 other people, but only one was there. She would be my supervisor for the night, Miss Kim. She's a great supervisor and worker, as well as really laid back. She told me to cover the ER for now, and if anything pops up, she'll let me know. I got up there and did my thing. It was really empty for a Saturday night. I cleaned out the rooms and the nurse's station, and before I knew it, it was 2 a.m. I went downstairs, and Miss Kim was already there heating up some coffee and eating something. She said I could chill out for a bit with her, and later on she'll need me to go up to the third floor and pull some trash that second shift didn't get. She was complaining how they never go up there to do their jobs, and they would do anything else to get out of it. Typical trash talk every shift does to another. I looked at the time, and it was around 2:45. So I said I'm going outside to smoke a cigarette, and then I'll go up. I went outside, and it was warm for February. I went to the smoking spot and looked up again. First floor and second floor lights were off, but the same room on the third floor was still lit up. I kept looking at it when I seen a silhouette looking back at me. I couldn't make out much, just a black mass in the shape of a person looking down at me. I finished my smoke and headed back in. Ms. Kim was already gone and left a sticky note on my cart telling me to go to the 3rd floor and just pull trash in the offices that weren't locked. In order to get up there, I have to take 2 elevators, one from the basement where I was, the other was in the front of the hospital. When I got to the other one and pushed 3, it jolted before starting to go up. For some reason, it stopped on the 2nd floor. Looking back, it was probably a last warning. When I got up there, everything felt so heavy. The air, the atmosphere. It was like I was hit with just an overwhelming amount of sadness. I cleared my throat and pushed my cart off and followed behind it. There were no renovations done since it was turned into office space. The rooms all looked like they did when it was a psych ward. I went to the end of one side and pulled all the trash I could get to. I looked around the rooms, and some had what looked like scratches on some of the walls. I can tell they tried to paint over them, but the paint wouldn't take to it. The 2 computer labs were day rooms once upon a time. Old TV anchors still in the corners. I hated everything up there, all those mentally ill people feeling trapped and discarded from the outside. When I got to the other side, I didn't see any light from any of the rooms. I carried on and got to 2 rooms before I heard someone humming. I tried to ignore it and hurried up a bit. The next room, room 3, the light came on. I stood there for a second and looked in. It was a small room with a computer and desk. I didn't see a trash can, but I couldn't help but walk in. I went to the window and looked out. My eyes went to where I standing smoking. This was the room. I stepped back and seen a woman's reflection in the window. I stood there frozen looking at her. She made eye contact with me and I heard a whisper in my ear. I can't get out. I turned quickly and no one was there. And I bolted out of the door and ran as fast as I could down the hall to the elevator. When I got there and pushed the button, I could hear the wind and a low growl screaming coming towards me. The second the doors opened, I ran inside, and I seen the woman standing in front of me. She looked so confused and sad. As I stood there looking at her with more sympathy than fear, she whispered to me as the doors started closing, "Why?" I pushed the 1st floor button, and the elevator dropped down. When I got off, I ran into Ms. Kim. She looked at me like I was crazy and asked what was wrong. I told her about the woman and told her about room 3. She smiled sadly and said, "I see you met Jane. She's been here for a long time. I didn't think she would do anything to you. Did she hurt you?" I said, "No, she didn't hurt me. She was asking me for help." Ms. Kim's eyes winded and said, "Don't ever go back up there, even in the daylight. That wasn't Jane." I went home early that night around 5 a.m. I couldn't help myself and looked up into room 3 one more time. There was no more silhouette of a woman, but a demon-looking creature staring at me, clawing at the window. I came back the next night and parked in the front. I stayed in the ER all night that night. Occasionally, if I walked past the elevator, I could feel a draft coming from the crack and hear a faint scream that I know is coming from room 3.